All right. All right. So it's been a minute since we've been on. All right. It's been a minute since we've been on. And we back. And the program is called the Shadow Self. Working the program through the 12 steps. Yeah, working the program through the 12 steps. And it's about 12-step recovery. Now, I like to start off saying that I want to talk about the program before I get off into this a little bit. I'm 35 years in recovery. 34, 7, 8 months clean. 35 years in recovery. 34, 7, 8 months clean. And I truly believe in the program of 12-step recovery. I'm just gonna put it like that. And the steps are how they're written. I'm a strong believer. When it's said that we can work this program in any area, it says any area of our lives. During my 35 years and 1 month and a few days in, it's never failed. Never, ever, ever failed. And so what I've done is, my journey in recovery have grown physically. When I say physically, I mean from the physical body to places I've been around the world. My mental outlook, my emotional outlook, and my spiritual development. These 12 steps have played, how a friend of mine said, an incalculable part inside of my recovery. And what has happened since I've been being more enlightened, and I'll say it again, being enlightened, or more illumination have been shining into my life. The steps have been evolving as I apply them to different situations and different developments in my life. So I'm saying that to say, and as I go more inward, my more inward journey, from the outside, physical, mental, physical, and emotional and spiritual part of the world, the outside world, in my development, more is being revealed. More is being revealed. And so in the past, since July last year, I started another inventory process through the steps. And I've been going to, or taking the uphill journey to another level inside my recovery. And I'm sharing it. Why am I sharing it? Because we only keep what we have by giving it away. I'm not going to get paid no money from this YouTube video. I might not get no new subscribers about these videos, but it don't matter to me. I give less than a damn about it, really. About compensation and subscribers and all that. The purpose of these videos is for me and anybody that can get some help, because I know I'm not the only one out here doing this, as you can see. As I have seen, You know, I know people is coming from a yoga perspective. They coming from a religious perspective. They're coming from all different types of agnostic perspective. They're coming from the atheist perspective. I'm coming from a 12-step perspective. I'm coming from 100% complete 12-step perspective, and the goal is enlightenment. The goal is continue to heal. The goal is to get more peace with self, and that self is me. That's what the self is. So anyway, let's move on. And this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with step 4 and step 5. And then I'll be going back from step 4 to step 5. I'll be coming back from step 1, 2, and 3. Step 1, step 2, and step 3. And I often refer to the honesty, the open-mindedness, and willingness of the program. So like I said, this video is mainly for me. I'm posting it on YouTube, but if anybody can get something from it, fine. The topic is the shadow self. Now, jumping off into this thing, a while back ago, when I say a while back ago, I want to say probably back in maybe July or August when I started this thing. I started off on trauma, on trauma. And I did a video called Trama, the Darkness. And I was working on a trauma inventory on how trauma is directly related to the addictive process. And that addiction is a process. It's not an event. It's a process. And it happens to the individual in stages before a person actually get to the drugs, the food, the sex, the gambling, the excitement. These are just symptoms of a bigger problem. So going about how does trauma initiate, or it can be an initiator of addiction. So I'm just going to review trauma for the, So I looked at it so when I did the research on the trauma, and I will be referring to my notes. When I did the research of trauma, this is what I came across. It says trauma, and I call it darkness. So when I speak of darkness and when I speak of trauma, I'm using them interchangeably. Now, there's 3 levels of trauma, but actually there's 4. There's 3 levels of trauma. In the first level, this is the level of trauma caused when an individual experiences a single stressful or dangerous event one time. That's called acute trauma. When an individual experiences a single experience of trauma, and trauma is defined as a stressful or dangerous event. Something very stressful or dangerous. It could be anything from a person being involved in a car accident to seeing a car accident. A person involved in a murder or seeing a murder. A person could have gotten beat up. The individual could have gotten bullied. It only had to happen one time. So that's the acute trauma. Then the next one is you got chronic. And chronic occurs when repeated and prolonged to a highly stressful and dangerous event. So the event in this instance of acute trauma is when the individual is experienced the repudiation of something. It could be repeated bullying. It could be repeated molestation. It could be repeated rape. It could be repeated poverty, for that matter. So it's repeated, but it's one incident that's repeated on and on and on again. Then the next one is complex. Complex trauma results from multiple traumatic events all at one time. So you say a person, they could, for example, being bullied at school, then they can go home to a very dysfunctional environment, then they could be molested or raped, robbed, beat up. All this happens at one time, and this is called complex trauma. It's trauma event after trauma event after trauma event and then after trauma event. But this is what happens in the case of all three examples of trauma or these highly stressful and dangerous events. The individual will develop an alter ego or another personality. And that alter ego or other personality is called a shadow personality, for simplicity. It's called a shadow personality. They develop a whole nother personality. It falls up under the Dr. Jekyll, and it falls up under the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. So I got to back up because I just put my tape recorder on. Now, moving on, and I'm not gonna start all over. You know, I just started taping and I only missed 6-7 minutes of it. So anyway, so moving on with this trauma, acute trauma, chronic trauma, complex trauma. What happens is the darkness is that the individual develops another personality. And inside this personality, this is the one that helps them to deal and cope with the situations that they or the trauma that they have been exposed to. So, in essence, what you have is the person before these events, and then you have the person after these traumatic events. This is what we have. Now, I'm going to read a definition of what the shadow self is. Shadow self. What is the shadow self? The shadow self, according to Jungian psychology, or Carl Jung, who's given credit for this term, it says, according to psychology, the shadow is the side of your personality that contains all of the parts of yourself that you don't want to admit to having. It is at first an unconscious side. It is only through the effort to become self-aware that we recognize our shadow. So let's say inside of a trauma event, molestation, for example. A lot of times people go into, well, from my experience, denial of the event was important for me so that I could survive. No, this really didn't happen to me. That was the beginning of the development of a whole nother personality. This didn't happen. The event was so traumatizing to me that I began to question and doubt the self, myself. Yeah. So, alter ego came about where part of that alter ego was the one where I had to prove myself, quote unquote, as being a man. Because the shame and the guilt of having that situation happen to me activated some feelings and emotions that I was not familiar with and did not know how to deal with. By me not telling anybody and keeping it a secret, still stuffing that energy, started development of an alter ego. Now let me say this at the same time. The shadow self is not always about the bad. You know, a lot of times you're not hearing people talking about, yeah, you know, it's the bad part of you. It's not all the time the bad. The shadow self is also, you know, when I was growing up, still younger cat, you know, 15, 16, I used to talk kind of proper, right? I talked real proper, you know, read a lot of books, you know, and bookworm, stuff like that. And so what happened was, I was being made fun of about that. You know, how I talk, you know, talking proper, you know, reading books and stuff like that. So what happened was, out of shame, I stuffed being or wanted to be quote unquote proper. And I put that in quotations mark. So when I start stuffing that, you know, I started speaking slang and, you know, getting into the walks and all that because my environment did not support that type of behavior. So I stuffed it. So what happened was, during the stuffing sessions, another personality began to develop. Another persona. That's what they call it. So, all that being said is, what I learned was, as I began to get older, you know, and go through life, is that if I behaved when certain behaviors was called for, that's how I behaved. That my persona, my main persona, was what, depending on where I was at in society, that was the personality or persona that I played. For example, if I was trying to impress people because I wanted something, I would put on the personality, talking proper, and yes ma'am and no ma'am, and maybe display a little knowledge from a couple books that I had read. That persona was the mask that I wore. Let's say if I wanted to, I'm trying to get into a relationship with somebody, young lady, right? Then I would behave a certain way and talk a certain way. That's called the persona. And the persona, coming from the Freudian definition, is the mask that I wore. The mask shield the shadow. However, now let me say, the shadow was anything that the ego didn't claim. So I didn't claim like being molested or nothing. So I left that over to the ego. Remember, the shadow is anything that the persona don't claim. Go straight to the ego. And let me look that up right quick, because I want to make sure I'm giving y'all some real good information right here. All right, and let me look right here. All right, so the shadow. The shadow is the animal side of our personality. It's like the id, the Freudian id. It is the source of both our creative and destructive traits. The persona. The persona in psychology, the personality that an individual projects to others, to the outside world, as different from the authentic self. We're gonna get into the authentic self. So my persona is what I project to y'all to, you know, when you first meet me. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, my name is Suni. You know, I'm a nice guy. I go to church every Sunday. I pay my tithes and stuff like that. No, yeah, I'm married, you know, and I don't fool around, I don't cheat, da 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 da. All right. Now, the persona, or the mask, the outward face we present to the world. It conceals our real self. The conformity archetype, i.e., it's the actor. Right? And the authentic self is who you truly are. And a person, regardless of your occupation, regardless of the influence of others, it is the honest representation in you. To be authentic means not caring about what others think. So that could be also a combination of but what I would say is it's an actualization and realization of your shadow self and your ego, all that combined. And I would say that takes some work. Because everybody that I know of, including myself, a lot of times I want to be liked. And so this liking would be the need to be liked. I pay the cost of sacrificing myself, or giving myself up, or giving up of the quote-unquote self. Yeah. Now let me go back. Let's go back to the traumatic events, whether it's acute, chronic, or complex. What happens is during these events, resentment, anger, and fear are born. Resentment, anger, and fear. And as a result of the resentment and the anger and the fear, the different personalities, or the different personas that I develop as a result of the trauma, I start the Dr. Jekyll, the development of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde behavior. And in case of the female, is the Miss Jekyll and Miss Hyde. All right. So inside the 12-step program, inside of the step work, is called there's a word we use, it's called the we. The we. And in the rooms of recovery, the we can be referred to as the group. The group that we sit in a lot of times. But however, for the purpose of recovery, I'm going to call the we mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional, the whole makeup of the human being. So when I speak of we, I'm talking about the mental, the physical, and the spiritual, emotional makeup of the human being. Why? Because this is where the disease of addiction, or this is how the disease of addiction affects the individual. Mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. That's how the human being is affected. And so in order to get to enlightenment, and I'm going to define enlightenment as the individual's efforts to get to know themselves on an intimate level. In other words, what we call character defects and shortcomings. Also their assets. So this is where this fourth step comes in. The fourth step states, it says, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of our selves. And when you look at that word, ourselves, let me look at it. Ourselves, that's the OURSELVES, and it's spelled with an S. So ourselves meaning more than one. So I'm going to connect that ourselves to the we, and I'm going to call it mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And how it's manifested is in the social, is in our social endeavors. That's how I'm going to connect that to. Now, let me say this, right? Because I know when some people hear this part, you know, I know your sponsor ain't taught it to you or something like that, so you might want to call it invalid or something like that. But I'm going to say this. This is my experience. And if you can resonate with it, fine, you know. So anyway, moving on about the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the we connected to the ourselves, what has to happen is that when I do my fourth step inventory, what I'm looking for is all four makeups, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and emotional makeup of myself, the experiences that affected me, negative and positive, and what archetypes or what personalities rose up out of that. Because remember, the goal is wholeness, to get better, and to be what? Illuminated. Right? Right? Because I'm telling y'all what my personal goals in recovery is. I want to become whole as possible. I want to heal as much as possible. But I also want to become illuminated. And there's another word I'm looking for. I'll catch up with it in a minute. Now, in doing this type of work, the to work on becoming whole again, then I had to sit down, pencil and paper, and start writing my stories out. And I have to write it out in a fashion where I'm not looking for any victims. I'm not looking to blame anything on anybody. I'm just trying to write something out to the best of my ability to where it happened so I can pinpoint certain personalities about me. Now, there's a word in psychology that they use, and they call it archetype. And the only thing an archetype is something that is derived from the original. Something that is derived from the original. Now going back to the resentment and the anger and the fear. So resentment, we're going to start there. And let's see if I got my pamphlet, my resentment. Now here it is. Bam. I have a pamphlet. Now, I'm going to talk about resentment, anger, and fear, because what happens is when trauma affects a human being, when it affected me, or when trauma affects a human being, and the different personalities or archetypes are born, what happens is that the individual develops resentment, they'll develop anger, and it'll cause fear. So for simplicity, I'm going to read what is resentment, what is anger, and what is fear.
This is Aldous Huxley,
from the
a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. A searing social critic, Mr. Huxley, 27 years ago, wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us. We'll find out why in a moment.
The Mike Wallace Interview, presented by the American
There we go. Got that out the way. I hit a wrong button. But anyway, let's start all over. All right, so resentment. Resentment is the way most of us react to our past. It is the reliving of past experiences again and again in our minds. It is the reliving of past experiences again and again in our mind. So reliving a molestation, reliving a murder scene, reliving bullying, reliving not being accepted, rejection. This is what that is. Anger. Anger is the way most of us deal with our present. It is our reaction to and denial of reality. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Let me read that again. Anger. Anger is the way most of us deal with the present. It is our reaction to and denial of reality. So let's say, for example, a person hit you with some reality about something, and you got mad. And inside this anger, hell, you could, not only did you get mad, you had some choice words for them. And in some cases, you probably went into a fit of rage. Put that thing out. Beat them up. This is what anger does. Because just past anger is what? Rage. Yeah. The next one is it's fear. And fear is what we feel when we think about the future. It is our response to the unknown, a fantasy in reverse. Fear. Let me read it again. Fear. It says fear. Say it is our response to the unknown, a fantasy in reverse. Fear is what we feel when we think about the future. Fear is what we fear. Let me calm down. Fear is what we feel when we think about the future. It is our response to the unknown, a fantasy in reverse. Then it says, all three of these things are expressions of our self-obsession. They are the way we react. They are the way we react when people, places, or things, past, present, and future, do not live up to our demands. They didn't say expectation. They said a demand. So I'm just going to read the whole thing. It's a little paragraph. It says, resentment is the way most of us react to the past. It is the reliving of past experiences, again and again in our minds. Anger is the way most of us deal with the present. It is our reaction to and denial of reality. Fear is what we feel when we think about the future. It is our response to the unknown, a fantasy in reverse. All three of these things are expressions of our self-obsession. They are the way that we react when people, places, and things, past, present, or future, do not live up to our demands. And it does not say expectations. So, talking about the resentment, the anger, and the fear, and connecting it to trauma, and I'm saying that resentment, anger, and fear is developed out of traumatic experiences, and out of the traumatic experiences, it's connected to the shadow self. Because check this out. I'm 12 years old. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, or people telling me. I'm going to school. I'm learning how to read. I'm learning how to write. I'm yes, ma'am. I'm no, ma'am. You know, everything the adults tell me. Then I go outside, and then the girl tell me I talk like a white boy. You talk like a white boy. You talk funny. Now, because I want to be liked by the girl, right? I want the girl to like me, right? Because I'm at holding hands stage. I'm at the holding hands stage of life. But she telling me I talk like a white boy. So now guess what happened? I'm gonna take that good boy, I'm gonna put him down, suppress him, I'm gonna suppress him, and bring up another one. While suppressing that guy, you know what happens? What happens when you suppress something? When you suppress something, it explodes. It blows up. So what happens is another archetype or another me comes up out of my ego. And I'm beginning to be what? Something that I ain't. Something that I'm really not. As a result of want to be accepted by people, I am now, or I have put myself in a position to be something that I'm not. I have just become a fake, a personality. I just developed a personality. As a result of the anger of being rejected. This is what's happening. A slick way of saying that is what? My mental illnesses has just begun, has just went on to another level because it started with the trauma. It started with the trauma. And now I'm developing what? Another side of me. Now at this stage of the game, and it's not really at this stage because when the trauma first happened, one of the tools that I developed is called denial. I went into a whole denial about the way I was feeling emotionally and mentally. And even though that denial was used to help me cope with a situation that I had no tools, I took that tool. Now I'm beginning to walk down the road of addiction because I have become self-obsessed. And what is the makeup of addiction? Obsession and compulsion. Because where you have obsession, compulsion is a component. And it's right there. So as I became obsessed, I became compelled through the obsession and developed somebody that I did not want to be. And I went into denial to tell myself that's who I wanted to be. So guess what? Lying to myself began at the early development of the development of the trauma. That's right. And now the darkness began to creep into my life. Or I began to live a life of what? Of darkness. I began to lose myself. I began to lose myself, as some people might say. For sure. So moving on. In step 4, it says we made a fearless and searching moral inventory. The morality of the inventory was not to condemn me as a good or a bad person, but just to look at the morals through each archetype or personality that I presented, not only to myself, but to the world or to society. Because remember, early on, when I said mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, that's the makeup of the human being, but socially would be the expression of those four elements of the makeup of the human being. Right? Sure. So that's when the inventory process comes in. I look at myself socially on all 4 levels. I look at myself socially. And then I begin to inventory and then get help as needed to define the different personalities that I struck up or that I developed. So let me go. Okay, so let me go in. So where the ego is the personality. Or should I say, the shadow is everything that the ego doesn't want. The persona is the mask. And let me get my notes out here again. Because I put a lot into this, man. And it's for me, because, you know, I want to get better. Now I want to make a comment, right, for people that work on themselves, you know, and you moving towards enlightenment and healing and enlightenment. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. You're moving towards enlightenment. Well, in order to be enlightened, you have to look at both parts of yourselves. You have to look at the light, and you have to look at the dark. And you have to look at how the light affects the dark and how the dark affects the light. So that's why the inventory is pertinent. It's pertinent. The 4-step inventory is pertinent. Because when you move on next to the next step and you do that inventory, and the 5th step says, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And the exact nature, for me, came when I began to inventory the traumatic events that happened in my life, or even the perceived traumatic events that happened in my life. I began to look at those and then label them. And begin to label them. So I had to look at my ego, my persona, my shadow, and myself. And myself. And then not only label the character defects, but look at how they began. And that's painful for a lot of people in recovery. And certain people have certain reasons on why these things are painful for them. Very, very painful. I had to say that when in the 5th step I start making the admissions, and it says to God, to myself, and another human being the exact nature, understand from my experience, it don't have to be in that order. It could be in any order how it's revealed, but those 3 elements has to be addressed. But I guarantee you're going to be the first one that the mission is going to be made to. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being. And the reason why I say that, in most cases, you're going to be the one, you are going to be the one, when you see it on that paper, or if you're going over with your sponsor, or your psychiatrist, or your therapist, or whoever you're going over with, it's going to be like, okay, I began to be a thief when I was 9 years old. Self-preservation. I was abandoned. So I started stealing at 9 years old so I can eat. That was my case, though. Yeah, going to the store and stealing so I can eat. So anyway, so the admission is the defects of character, but it's the defects of character, the shortcomings, but it's also in the assets. And I'm going to tell you why. Because sometimes I saw my assets as a wrong. Yeah, that's right. I seen some of my assets were wrong. They were not like knowing how to read and learning astronomy and stuff like that. That was seen as a wrong where I was from. Right. So what happened was, anything good, I stuff, and I let the bad stuff come out. The bad part of because that's what people like to see. And then when I wanted something, I put the mask on. Now I know a lot of y'all, I know a whole lot of y'all, because I know I'm going to hear it right. You know, people, when I put this stuff out, people tend to come at me and want to point their finger. It's called projection. They want to project their stuff on me because they see themselves in it. You know, I'm through with arguing with people. Like, yeah, you know. But damn it, I'm just going to say, you just seeing yourself and you responding to you. And you trying to project your shit on me. And that's going to happen for anybody. That might be your loved one, your friend, your co-worker. Because everybody does it. Everybody do it. Because what happens is, and there's a saying in the rooms, is when I get better, everybody else get better. But here's the deal behind that. They don't just get better. Some people just don't want to get better. They rather live a lie. So when they see you getting better, they project themselves on them and start calling you, telling you they told you about you. And it's like, really? I told me about me, and you just responded appropriately. That's how that goes. They're projecting them shadow selves, their shadow, to you because you shone light. You have shone light on their shadow. And you triggered it. Man, I'm getting this shit. Sure is. The thing about the recovery process is this. More so than yoga, Taoism, or any other healing modalities. The thing in this modality, in this particular modality here, is to be aware of is that when you start getting better, it may not be good for people around you. Why? Because they got their own persona that they trying to uphold like they the shit. So when you stop, it's a term that they used to use a while back in recovery. I don't hear no more. You don't pull the covers off of people because you done took them off yourself. You done got butt naked. So you start exposing people. And they don't like you for it. They don't like your punk ass for it. Sorry about that. I can't edit it out because I don't do editing. So now you have to get to the point, and this is fifth step stuff, and this is part of the admission of the fifth step, to admit to God, to yourself, and another human being. When you start not only admitting and accepting and recovering from the exact natures of those wrongs, and we're going to get off into them in the sixth and the seventh step. When you start admitting that, what happens is you start affecting other people around you. So you better be strong. I ain't gonna even say you better be strong. The choice is up to yours, because remember, the same person that did all that stuffing at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old could be the same person that could do the stuffing at the age you at right now. Because the fear of what? Loss. The fear of loss. in the recovery process, that's, I think, has been one of my most challenging situations I have ever been put into. The fear of loss of people, places, and things. And it's been one of the things that a lot of times have put me on the path of relapse. I ain't gonna say I relapsed because I didn't. I was on the path to relapse. And how you get on the path to relapse is resentment, anger, and fear, or through the fear of loss. Resentment, either the fear of loss, resentful at the past, or angry at the past, or anger in the present. And that's what the fear of loss can bring. And what happens is the triggers begin to, the triggers are in effect. And then a decision will be made on, should I recover in this area or not? That's what happens. That's exactly what happens. And one part of the game, and when this is going on, what happens is the individual can start running. You know, we used to call it put your running shoes on. They'll put their running shoes on and they'll go from church to the rooms, to the yoga center. Your ass start running all over the place. You run to the casino. You run to the gambling house. You run to the hoes and the prostitutes. And eventually you run to the dope house. Or go get you a bottle. That's what happens. That's what happens when the suppression starts. The fear kicks in. The fear of loss. That's why in one of the books of recovery it states you have to be vigilant. And recovery has to be your most important thing. And some days it's going to be a lonely ass path. Especially if you want to become enlightened. And you want to, and not only do you want to become, paying the price to become enlightenment, paying the price of recovery, and that's exposing the shadow self in order to merge with the self, because that's the only way you're going to get better. And what's going to happen is going to find out. There's going to be an experience like it was when you first got clean. Remember when you first, in your first 3-4 years, and for me it was like 10. The first 10 years in recovery, what happened? When did nobody believe that you was clean? And they say, oh, you can't have a beer? Oh, you think you better than us now? That ain't going nowhere. I'm 35 years in. Let me tell you, it ain't going nowhere. I'm 35 in the gate. 35 out the gate. 35 years in recovery. 34 years, 8 months clean. Maybe 9, I don't know. So what has to happen is inside this 5th step. Let's get back to the 5th step. Once I make the admission to God, to myself, and another human being, the exact nature of the wrong, and it's not the wrong, it's the exact nature. It's the exact nature of the wrong. Then I move on to step 6. And step 6 says, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these shortcomings. And it says these. Is it defects of character? Yeah, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character And mind you, that we is mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And how I became entirely ready was because in my social day-to-day living, the manifestation of the defects was so strong that I couldn't stand it, let alone people around me. Really though. And that's where I'm at today, man. That's where I'm at today. That's why I'm doing this work. That's why I said I ain't trying to make a gain a following on YouTube, Facebook. Is that I'm still working on enlightenment and getting free. And what has happened is that my shadow, is that my inventory process is taking me to my shadow where I'm start inventorying my shadow, doing what's called the shadow work. And I don't need somebody from a different modality to tell me a damn thing. Because the 12 steps really does this stuff for you. Right? You know, I might tell they ass something, really. I've been doing this shit for 35 years. You know, I ain't bragging, it's just a fact. And that and let me, not only a different modality, I mean a different fellowship too. You know. So anyway, and I'm not relieved of all my fears or my anxiety. But here's the deal. At this part, I'm willing to face it. Now I know what's going on. I know what's going on this level. So I talked to the old timer with 40 years, and that's been doing this for a while. And I like ask for some advice. You know, I try to get some advice, you know, and I'm gonna tell you something about a person with some time. They ain't got no advice for you. They just say work the steps, you know. But they hear what you got to say and they just give you like a nod or yeah, you moving in the direction. But I finally kind of like realize when the book says, it says advice could be, paraphrasing, it says something you don't want to do. You don't want to give people advice. And the reason why is they blame it on you. They'll blame, when something go wrong, they're going to blame it on you. When something go right, they're going to blame it on you. And it's really not your shit to give. So anyway, so we're going to move in. And I'm going to get to the 7th step. And then I'm going to wrap this up because my next video, and now, and it took me like almost a month to come back and do this, right? So my next video is going to be more geared towards still in the enlightenment path, still how, okay, where I'm going to take this thing to is to why it's necessary, the enlightenment / the shadow self and the self has to come together. That's two different energies. That's two different energies. So we're combining both energies now when you put two energies together and they become one, what happens is my energy level theoretically should be more intense. As I come out of denial and I start recognizing certain things about me. Bam. Okay. Step 7. We humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Now in step 6, we talked about these defects of character. And what were these defects of character? These defects of character was when I took that inventory and I looked at my shadow self. I looked at my shadow self and I looked at how they were affecting my life in the here and the now. I looked at how they affected my life in the past. I looked at the darkness. I looked at the trauma, where it came from. And then I sought a spiritual solution. And what are the spiritual solutions? There was the spiritual principles embedded in every step that I took. There were the spiritual principles embedded in every step that I took, from step 1 all the way to that point, which is step 7. When I asked God, the quote-unquote God of my understanding, to remove my shortcomings, it wasn't the defects, it was the shortcomings. And the shortcomings is nothing but a defect that's acted out, plain and simple. So it was the defects that was causing harm in my life, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, on a social level, outward, and a social level, and also inward. So I got to grab in my outer world and my inner world. The shortcomings was my shadow self. Also in my ego. That's what that was about. So in my particular situation, I began on the path of energy healing. But what I found out is that my energy was not quote-unquote strong, because I had not addressed my own character defects and shortcomings. So therefore I was in my way telling myself lies about who I was, although I had an honest desire. Did that go over anybody's head? Really though. So moving on with this thing, I'm about to wrap it up in a minute. So moving on, the purpose of combining the shadow self and the shadow self and the self. And let me get a definition of the self again. The self. The authentic self. The authentic self is who you truly are as a person, regardless of your occupation, regardless of the influence of others. It is an honest representation of you. To be authentic means not caring about what others think. Not caring about what others think. Does that mean your kids, your lover, your significant other, your boss? It's me being authentic. But how can I be authentic if I'm still living a life of lies? So therefore, the 12-step process is the modality that I use to get to my authentic self, as a result of the darkness that's been brought on by the trauma. Am I making any sense? Damn right I am. What did the trauma incubate? From the weak, mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. The persona and its archetypes. The persona in psychology, the personality that an individual projects to others and the world. It's the mask. And where did I get the mask from? The mask was developed through the trauma. Anywhere from, I don't like you, you talk like a little white boy, till you got a short dick. You know, them type of things. To your mama telling you, you look like your daddy and he ain't shit. All that shit is traumatic. That's traumatic to a little person. So I don't want you telling me don't be like my daddy. And you the one had the baby. I never could understand that one. Don't be like him. Or they tell you just like your mama. You're a bitch like your mama. Don't be, you know. But what that done was, that made me begin to stuff feelings and emotions that I was connected to that person with. And I saw it better to be like Jesse James. He was a bad mother. You feel me? Be like John Shaft. Be like Spark. I began to get off into other addictions. Feel me? That's why I had to we admitted to God and to ourselves the exact nature of the wrong, of our wrong. That's why I became entirely ready to have God remove all these. It says these defects of character, and these defects are the ones that I had written down that came from the shadow self. I'm telling you my experience. You can tell me what you want. So let me throw this in there. So now, I done got me a girlfriend. You know, we kissing and hugging. Going to the playground, she tell me she loved me. I tell her I love her. We both lying. Damn it. We both lying. Why are we lying? Because she telling me she loved me. She loved a pretender. She loved a faker. It ain't going to be until she experienced another side of me that she can honestly tell me that, and I experienced another side of her, and that side is the shadow. For real. All right. The shadow is so ingrained in myself that I need. Now, when I say ingrained, let me put it in words of a step. What does step one say? It said we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is the person, and a lot of people equate addiction with drugs and alcohol, and it's not. Those are the symptoms of the disease of addiction. That's what they are. So until they begin to see until I experience the shadow self working in my life, breaking me down slowly, that's when that admission is made. Because what do the second step say? The second step says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could, and it don't say would, restore us to sanity. What's the insanity then if you being restored to sanity? The insanity is how the shadow works on the self. And how the self works. Quote, my character defects and my shortcomings while they at work in my social life. That's what's up. That's what's up. And the only thing that happened was, now you know what? I ain't gonna even waste my time speaking on other modalities and what they're about, because this is about 12-step stuff. Really don't. The serenity prayer. Let me throw that in while I'm at it. Let me throw that in and see how much time I got. The serenity prayer says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what it say, right? You go into meetings, you hear the serenity prayer. I don't care, AA, NA, SA, FA, any A. Most of them, 90%, 99% use the serenity prayer. What is the serenity prayer saying to you? It says, grant me the serenity. Grant me the calmness. Grant me the calmness. I got to throw it in there, right? If you're a Muslim, it says, grant me Islam. That's what it's saying. Because what does Islam mean? It means peace. It means serenity. But that's what it means. That's what Bush said. Bush said Islam means peace. So anyway, it says, grant me the serenity or the calmness to accept the things I cannot change. And I can't change nothing outside of me. Nothing outside of this here cannot change. Sorry. I might have some influence over it, but I can't change it. When it comes to people, places, and things. And then it says what? The courage to change the things I can. Bam! It says the courage to change the things I can. I can change me more than I can change anything and anybody around me. And if you think you could change somebody around you, bullshit. You can't change nobody with lies, manipulations, spells, none of that shit. They don't work on me. You can't hit me with the Jedi mind trick. How about that? It says the courage to change the things I can. So I'm asking for the courage to change me. Because when I take that inventory and I look at that inventory of the self and the shadow self, and I look at my ego, and I look at my self, and I look at my persona, those masks I wear, and I come to find out I'm powerless over a lot of those masks that I wear or have worn because I wore them so long, they're deeply ingrained. I can't take them off by myself. So I need a God-like power. Because what the second step has shown me, it says a power greater than myself could, and it says could restore me to sanity. What I have to look at is that the insanity that personality that I wear has brought into my life. How it affected me mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. That my social life have become so affected by that I'm damn near going insane. A nutcase. Now, let me say this. I know some people I know, they gonna look at my video and they gonna try to throw this shit in my face, and I'm gonna cuss you out. So I'm gonna say, you took my inventory and you signed your name, so you identifying with it. You just as sick as I am, or even sicker. I'm just gonna let your ass know that off the rip. Because you're gonna like me anyway, or you're not. And at this point, I don't even give a damn. Because it's my ass at stake, not yours. That's what's really going on. So I'm gonna post this on Facebook too. So anyway, moving on. Step 7. Now I talked about the step 2 process and how I could be restored to sanity. And the only way that I can be restored to sanity is that I have the willingness to change the things that I can. And then the last part of that prayer said, and the wisdom to know the difference. My wisdom is going to be based on my experience of knowing the difference of what about me that I can change and what about me that I can't change, because a lot of things about me, I ain't gonna say a lot, there are things about me that I cannot change on my own. And certain things I ain't gonna have the willingness to do. All right. Let me change my camera position. And I'm about to wrap this up. I could have put the Serenity Prayer on there. I was saying it in my steps too. So, all right. I've been on this thing for an hour. It's 11:33. I went through steps 1 through 7. We're talking about the shadow self. And I think I did a pretty good video because I snatched the other one off. A couple of y'all viewed it. I got some critique on it. Or I got, some people talked about it. But anyway, the shadow self. Trauma. How traumatic events shape the shadow. I was reading when I was doing my research, because I do research. I ain't gonna be coming at y'all half-assed and shit. But I did some research, and my research, Carl Jung, he said, when you're born as a blank sheet of paper. You're born without sin. These are, and I'm just going to put it out the way he put it out. Because I agree with him, philosophically, really, in this area anyway. He said you're born without sin. He said you're born as on a clean shape, a clean slate. And then as things start happening to you, then as traumatic events start happening to you, then your personality or your persona is formed, and then the shadow self is formed, and then hell, So anyway, wrapping this game up. I'll be back shortly, maybe in the next couple of days, and I'm gonna move in on this shadow self because, like I said, this is for me. It's not really, if you get something out of it, fine. If not, I don't know what to tell you. But I'm moving towards enlightenment. And I'm also, as an energy healer, I had to cleanse myself. And one modality calls the pain body. So I have to get some of this pain off my body so my energy can flow. So when I'm doing energy healing, I'll be able to connect to a person and then disconnect. That's what this is for. This ain't for to sound good. For none of y'all. Ain't none of y'all that important. Nobody. Sorry. I'm working on me for me. I'm using 12-step. I'm using a 12-step modality. I don't need nothing else. If I want something else, I get it. But so far, 35 years, the 12 steps been working fine. For me, anyway. I hollered at my boy Mike Haney, Mike H. Knight, Mike Johnson, hollered at him. Everybody can't do this. So anyway, thanks for letting me share.